Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jermillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people and professionals, friends, colleagues in my network. So these are great leads that I'll be interviewing on the books that have impacted or contributed the most to their careers, their life, their work, all these worlds that intersect. The three categories of books I usually cover on here are books that they're sharing with me that I haven't read. A second category where we're covering a book that we've both read, comparing notes, whether specifically read for this series or we read it in our past lives. And then the third category is when I have the author and or publisher on to talk about the message behind the books that they want to cover and get out there to the masses. So today, my guest is Dr. Alvarez Boyd, and Eric is a Professor Emeritus at James Madison University and an Associate Professor of Marketing at the University of Central Florida. His research on leadership has been published in leading management journals in the Harvard Business Review and Advertising Age. He received his PhD in marketing from the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia and is an award-winning scholar who is recognized internationally for the innovativeness and quality of his instruction. Eric promotes leadership development and training through his work with FairWays to Leadership, a national nonprofit he co-founded with his wife, Anna Alvarez Boyd. The mission of FairWays to Leadership is to teach leadership and networking skills to college students from diverse communities through the experience of learning to golf. Eric is also a leadership coach at Inntinnean Coaching.
That's right.
Is that the right way to pronounce it, Eric?
That's Gaelic, so that's right.
And Eric's coaching philosophy is that every person has innate strengths, and the use of those strengths is key to successfully leading others and oneself. Working with clients to understand their leadership strengths through reflection and assessment, Eric provides clients with a customized approach that allows them to be more effective leaders. And I was lucky enough where Eric had reached out after hearing about the series, wanting to share about his book. We went into each other's resume, learning what it is as founders that we're here to do, what we want to do, what we want to achieve. So it makes sense that he's here as a guest for me today, with me today. So Eric, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. And, as a fellow coach, it's always good to, sit down and talk about, best practices, how we're trying to reach out and help our clients.
Absolutely. I found through this series that even though I've had maybe a third of the people on here have been leadership coaches, the conversation never gets old. Everybody has their own reasons for doing it, their own experiences for doing it, their own drivers, motivators, inspirations, whatever it may be. So the conversation, even if you're talking leadership coaching, just never gets boring because everybody has their unique take on it and why they do it. So I'm glad you're here and I want to hear yours. So Eric, where I usually start is, who are you today? I read the bio, I read your background, but what does your work look like today in the day-to-day?
During the school year, right, I'm active as a professor of marketing. In fact, we're just closing down the spring semester now. Summer's ahead of me. So as I start to, turn the summer, it's giving more attention to the research that I do, which typically deals with leadership issues, and also planning with the executive director we have for FairWays to Leadership, which is a nonprofit. Summer is a big time when we do our planning for the upcoming year. And then coaching practice, right? I just on some coaching sessions earlier this morning. So, sort of those three things, whether it's teaching, research, nonprofit, or coaching, usually one of those things or a mix of those things is going on in the course of the day.
That's awesome. That's a nice mix, especially throughout the year. I think any of us kind of, if we're doing one thing throughout the year, kind of gets monotonous, but it's a nice mix of everything that you got going on.
Yeah, and it dovetails, right? It's aligned. I mean, when I'm teaching, it's usually MBA graduate classes on marketing management. With the research, it's a lot on the leadership side, especially with marketing leaders, because that's what my area of expertise is from a scholarship perspective. And then, and then I get a chance to go from looking at, say, managers and executives to looking at emerging leaders with the nonprofit, since they're college students. And then with my clients, they sort of are spread all over the spectrum with respect to early career type of leaders versus later leaders. But there's that common leadership trait through all of it.
Yeah. Does it, do you find that working with the students, the younger segment that you work with, that it kind of fires you up and keeps you motivated because you have fresh minds coming through with perspectives of their own, I can imagine that helps kind of keep things going, because it's a whole new pipeline and different cohorts of
Yeah.
new mindsets and mentalities.
Yeah, I mean, their enthusiasm is infectious, right? I mean, it's something I always say, in my job as a professor and working, I feel like I never age because they never age. So it's like they're the same age all the time. So it's like, wow.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Yeah, so that that enthusiasm they bring is infectious. That willingness to learn, right? That sometimes when you get more seasoned people, there's a little bit more reluctance to sort of think about things in a new way. So, but they, the younger students that college students we work with, and the young leaders that I work with, they're just they're like sponges. They just want to know, how can I do better? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's a great way to think about it. So I would say it's the open-mindedness that sort of keeps me excited, the enthusiasm they bring, and also just sort of the checks that they give me. Like there are oftentimes situations where I go, God, I've taken that for granted, right? And you're like, whoa, wait, I need to step back a moment and sort of help them understand this more basic thing so that they can then succeed. So it's always a good reality check for me to make sure I'm not taking anything for granted.
So are there specific examples that stand out of
Yeah.
insights that they provided or checks that they gave you, maybe a new way of thinking or a new way or new perspective of looking at something that you thought you knew?
Yeah, and I'll share one. This comes up a lot in the nonprofit we have, in that a lot of students talk about, what this has really done. I mean, the leadership traits that you focus on are great, but it's just given me confidence to try new things. And I think, having, now many years out, you think confidence, don't you just have to have that automatic confidence that allows you to step into new things, right? Because you've got this repertoire of experiences that you can draw on. But for them, it's like, I don't have that, that depth of expertise. So, for them to have that confidence really allows them to step into new things. So that would be the one thing I would say that really stands out. That sort of reminds me, don't take for granted that you have confidence. Not everybody has it.
Yeah. And I haven't taught students, but I've worked a lot with college students, with graduate students, volunteering, coaching and whatnot. But it is amazing how much of their unique skills they can bring to the table that they're not even aware of.
Yeah.
Some of them may step up and say, whether it's an exercise or a mock interview, whatever it may be, essentially they'll say, I have nothing to offer, excuse me. I haven't had an internship. I haven't worked, I've been playing baseball. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, tell me a little bit about that. Yeah, we practice in the morning, we practice in the afternoon. I was just selected to be the captain of the team. It's like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? So they don't know how to look at and pick out and parse the value in what they're doing. Even if you don't have a job, even if you're not playing sports,
Mhm.
there's got to be something unique to you that you can bring to the table that a lot of times they don't know about. So it's incredible to see how much, if we don't catch them and intercept them and say, no, listen, wait, pay attention to yourself, they may go through, those next phases believing that they have nothing to offer.
Yeah, I mean, and being a fellow coach, I mean, it's about self-awareness, right? And being aware of what your superpowers are, what you bring to the table, and sharing those. I mean, so often, it's, to your point, they don't recognize them, but then when they do recognize them, they feel a little, well, is this, I'm working with people who have 20 years of experience. I'm like, yeah, but they probably have blind spots that you can help them, reveal. So for sure, helping them not only just recognize their confidence or their strengths, but also be willing to bring them.
Eric, is the coaching you're doing just one-on-one? Is it group? What kind of services do you offer? Is there a variety, or is it just the one-on-one?
Right now, it's just one-on-one. I mean, I do have some. I'm sort of a, it comes with you see it with the founder. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I'm always thinking, okay, what's the next thing that I could do? So I do have some group situations that I'm looking about building, but right now it's one-on-one, and just sort of, meeting with folks that who are the clients and just helping them sort of recognize their strengths, think about how they can leverage those strengths, and then help them get to where they want to get in their career. Because that's the thing, with a lot, I do work with a lot of, say, I would say 5 to 10 year out, managers, just as directors. So they're thinking, okay, I got this far. What does the next 10 years look like? How do I, oftentimes they've just stepped into a new role. How do I sort of make that transition from being a colleague to being a manager, right? And those dynamic changes that take place in relationships. So a lot of work around that area.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like we just spoke about students and how they don't know how to draw from their own experiences, but it's amazing how many times managers step up into a higher management position and still don't know how to bring their experiences from the past forward.
Mm-hmm.
They think, I've been trusted for this position, I've been promoted, I've been brought in, but they're still unsure of themselves. Maybe they have some imposter syndrome. And yet, even with their experience, say they're 10, 15 years in after education, sometimes they don't even know how to look back and draw upon their experience. They're kind of trapped in the now and producing, but don't really take the time to look back and say, okay, why did they hire me? What do I have to offer? How do I refine that? How do I bring it to the forefront again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that's the question that seems to sort of stop a lot of young leaders in their tracks is, why do you think they hired you? Why do you think they promoted you in this managerial position? And to have them pause for a moment and think about, okay, what is their perspective, right? What do they see in me? Oftentimes will help, unlock that box that is keeping them from being able to see their own strengths.
Yeah. Eric, to understand how you ended up here, can you kind of walk me through your career, beginning with when you stepped into whether education, higher education, or into the workforce, whatever the first step was? What did that look like from then until now?
Well, that's a good question. I think, as you asked that, the story that came to my mind that I guess I would start with is, I remember being, 12 or 13. My mom was a single mom. And so what she would do is she would give me $5 when she had to go to work, and there was no school. Give me $5, take me to a little 9-hole golf course in the small town that we lived in. And I could go around and around and around just playing, so I'd play 8, I'd play 27, 36, whatever the case may be. And I think that sort of, as I think about where I am now, was sort of an important experience, because made sports to be an important part of my life. And so, like right now, I teach in the DeVos Graduate Sport Business Program at UCF. So I've gone from being a sort of an amateur player to playing in college, and now I'm teaching in college. Sports business. The FairWays, the leadership, the nonprofit is using golf to teach leadership and networking skills. And I think the other thing that came out is this sort of that competitive spirit, right? That the golf course is unique, right? You're not really playing against others. You're playing you against the golf course and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really, sort of that got ingrained in my mind, this notion of continuing looking to perform well, to get better. And that's sort of been characteristics of my career throughout. And then, coming from that situation, I was a first generation college student. So, that experience of being able to say, not having anyone around me necessarily telling me this is the right thing to do, just coming to the recognition myself, and it being very intrinsically valued, inside of me. And education, I saw education as my ticket, right? It was my opportunity, and it's continued to be an opportunity for me. And I'm a real believer in it. And that's why, my being an academic, having this nonprofit that teaches. And then coaching to me is a lot about teaching, but it's more of helping people to sort of teach themselves, to sort of, recognize for themselves, what their strengths are, what they can do.
So Eric, what did when you were a youngster, what did being a first gen college student, what did that look like? What did you go to school for? What was the path into education, and then from education to now, what did your path look like? The different positions you may have been in, what led you through that path to now?
Yeah, so grew up in a very small town in the South. It's kind of interesting. I tell some people, I don't know if anybody remembers, maybe John, you remember the old Barron books that had, each couple of pages was a college you could flip through.
Yeah.
I used to carry that around with me. and for some reason, I just knew this was my path, right? And so I just applied, and I remember the day I sort of share with my mother, oh, I got, this acceptance to this college, and it was Tulane University. Her first question was, well, how are we going to pay for it? And I said, I don't know. They figured they would let me in, so I'll show up, and I figure between us, we'll figure it out. So, that's always just sort of been my mentality, is like, it's like, okay, get the opportunity first, then you can figure out all the details. And I think that goes back to something that really is sort of something I try to help my clients and help the college students. It's like, first it starts with knowing where you want to get, right? Don't get bogged down in the details. Those details will work themselves out, right? But know where it is you want to get. Keep that sort of your North Star, and then start taking steps. And some steps will work. Some steps you may have to go back to start going forward. So, for example, I ended up, transferring from Tulane University because I figured out real quick that New Orleans was a great place to be, but it was going to be hard for me to get through 4 years of school there. So, so I left there and I went to a small school called Beloit College in Wisconsin, which worked out great for me, right? It wasn't where I started, but it was where I ended up, and it got me to where I wanted to be. So it's that adaptability too. And that's one of the traits we teach in the program. It's like, as long as you know where you're trying to get to, then you can start to know how do you adapt in order to get there.
I think so many people get hung up on that, especially younger people, where they think everything is perfectly laid out, that there is the script, that every step is going to look a certain way. If I get to a certain step and I stumble, that's it. I'm not meant for whatever's at the top of the staircase.
Mm-hmm.
So I love your idea of figure out what it is you want. And then there's this kind of experimentation that happens between where I am now and there, like, this trial and error. But I think so many of us up until a certain age get tripped up thinking that it has to look a certain way. I don't think we like the unpredictability or the trial and error of any kind of experimentation, which is unfortunate.
I mean, but those experiences I had, at Tulane, and the experiences I had of getting to Beloit College, and then the experiences there, I mean, they just made my life richer, right? And it also helped me to see in the future endeavors, okay, as long as I know where I'm going, that's what's important to me, right? I know I can adapt as things happen in order to be able to get there. And so, like I say, that's why it's one of our key leadership traits we have in the program of FairWays and Leadership is this notion of adaptability. And to your point, it's probably going to be a zigzag, not a straight line to get there.
So what did you graduate college with, Eric?
Oh, so I went to Beloit. I got a degree in economics, and then, went to work and basically ended up in California, which, was another story, but, of wanting to sort of go west and finding a way to get out there. And then when I got out there, I worked in industry for about 10 years, and I was in the workers' comp insurance industry. And so I started out as an auditor, then became Northern California regional audit manager for the organization. And then along the way, got married, had a couple of kids. And then my wife got an opportunity back in Washington, D.C. And so I saw this as an opportunity for me to make the transition from industry into academics. So, unlike many academics, I had somewhere 10 to 15 years of practice first before I got into it, which I think informs a lot of what I do in the classroom, informs a lot of what I do with respect to my research, and is also part of the motivation I have to reach out, through the coaching to individual managers, those types of things.
Eric, why economics?
Why? Well, I've also always been fairly practical. So I figured, economics, business, and I like business. I do like business. I mean, there were a couple of little startups I did with buddies, like when I was growing up, I had one where we had this business where we would go in and clean out attics because we were, and with the hope that we would find something, like we were really avid baseball card collectors, right? So we were hoping we'd stumble across some great baseball card collection.
So then you go to DC. then you said you went into academia.
Yeah.
So when the transition, or when the, I guess, supplementation of education with your entrepreneurial endeavors of coaching?
Yeah, so actually, got my PhD at University of Virginia, like you mentioned earlier. Went to JMU, which is or James Madison University, which is just, it's not too far away from UVA, and taught and did research. It's sort of the traditional academic route, for most of the 15 years I was there, then retired. And it was really when I went to University of Central Florida and the occurrence of the pandemic that really was the impetus for starting FairWays of leadership, and then out of that came sort of the coaching. So when I went from JMU to UCF, that's when I started teaching in the DeVos Sport Business Management program. So before that, I'd been teaching more traditional marketing and sales classes, but now in this sports context, I was focusing, okay, what can I do here? And it was summer 2020. I'd probably maybe about the time that you were starting to do the podcast yourself for the American Marketing Association. My students were feeling frustrated. They weren't getting internships because nobody was, everybody was going home, and this was right around when George Floyd was murdered, so they were feeling a lot of social unrest that was going on. And so my wife and I had situations in industry where golf had created opportunities for us. And so we just said, well, why don't we just invite the students out? Golf was one of the few things you could do at that time. And so I had a class of 20, invited them out, 6 came out, and we had a 2-hour lesson where we just sort of introduced them to the game. And we're thinking, okay, we've done something good, patting ourselves on the back, they can take it where they want. And at the end of those 2 hours, they say, well, when do we meet next week? Okay, you want to meet next week? Right? And so it sort of started to evolve. And I guess probably maybe about 5 weeks into it, there was a young black man who came up to me who was in the cohort. And he said, Dr. Boyd, says, I like what you're doing here. He said, but, what I need is not just a club in my hand. I need to know how to be socially confident and competent in this environment, because growing up, it wasn't a part of my culture. And and this is a game that has all these terms, these rules, this etiquette, dress codes. He said, so what's more important to me, he said, is being able to walk onto the golf course and not necessarily play it, but be able to socialize, be able to, interact effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what gave us, my wife is an executive coach. She was an executive coach. She's sort of been my role model for that, my inspiration to do it myself. We started to think about, well, what could we use this experience to sort of help them, A, develop sort of their networking skills, and B, their leadership skills. And so we just sort of spent some time thinking about it. We came up with our 6 leadership traits, which are mindfulness, adaptability, integrity, curiosity, empowerment, and strategy. And so we just sort of developed a curriculum that sort of helps students show how these traits can help them be successful leaders on the course as well as off the course. And so that led to it. And now, 4 years later, we're just crossing 700 alumni at 10 schools in 5 states in the District of Columbia.
Wow.
So it's been a little bit of lightning in the bottle.
Unexpected, but there it is.
Unexpected, yeah, So which is, it's just kind of funny, just so that serendipitous of, making, extending the offer, hearing from the students that, this is something they wanted to learn more about. And then my wife and I sort of noodling about how can we make this more than just another golf lesson. And I think that's what's really, really sort of captured the imagination of our students, many of whom, so I should maybe back up if I could, about 90% of our students have never played golf. So we're really getting, new students to the game. We provide them with a little Sunday bag of clubs that they use while they're in the program. And about 70% of our students are women, and about 60% of the students are students of color. And so it's really about making a warm invitation to people who golf has not necessarily always been the most welcoming sport, right? And so that, I think, has really resonated with a lot of students who say, I knew about golf, but I never really thought it was something that would be available to me, which going back to what I mentioned earlier, these moments in your life where you go, I can't really take something for granted anymore. So, for me to think about golf, growing up with it, for many of these students, they didn't have that same opportunity. So that's what we're really trying to do here is make that warm invite and open up the opportunities that golf brings. I mean, it's no coincidence that 90% of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies play golf, and 80% of executives say that golf has played a role in their career success, right? But if you can't play the game, you don't know the game, you're left out of those opportunities.
Yeah. That's amazing, though, on the program. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eric, does it make sense from your childhood that this is what you're doing? How do you reconcile that?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, I mentioned, the first thing that came to my mind when you asked me that question earlier was, $5 out at the golf course, spending the day. And then, the entrepreneurship that I've always sort of had in my spirit, the willingness to adapt, to get to North Stars. It makes perfect sense. It feels like everything is sort of coalesced into this sort of a line trek that I'm sort of traveling.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Now, what about the service to people? Because you seem very service oriented, servant leadership, serving others. There's just certain tones that you use, certain language you use, certain ways you tell your stories where it's like, okay, this is a guy that's really into serving other people, helping other people. Where did that come from?
I think it's just sort of just part of my essence. I mean, it's not like I took a class in it, or I'm trying to build up points towards something. I mean,
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm
yeah.
always curious when I hear that essence,
Mhm.
perfect word. When I hear that essence in somebody, I'm always curious. Okay, where did this come from? Like, was it upbringing? Did they have a certain role model in their life that really demonstrated how to help other people, serve other people? Single mother, was it that?
Um, I think it was just, I always just thought it was the right thing to do. I mean, I don't really think about it. It's like I recognize, that having the level, the amount of education I have is a privilege. I understand, being a male is a privilege, and this, so with me there comes a responsibility with
Mhm.
that to be able to try to create the similar opportunities for others. I mean, my wife and I talk a lot about, if you really want to know the essence of the nonprofit, it's about social mobility, because we tell our students, we don't know when it's going to happen in your career, but at some point, somebody's going to ask you if you play golf, especially in business, right? And
Mhm.
behind that question is an opportunity. And if you haven't had the chance to learn the game, you can't say yes to that opportunity,
Yeah.
right? And it's is it going to make or break your career? I don't think so, but it can elevate your career. And so we just want our students, we just want everybody who we have the opportunity to serve to be able to, to have that opportunity. And it's a big part of why we wrote the book. It's the chance to sort of get that message to more people than we can reach right now with the program.
Um, and then one last question before we get to the book, Eric.
Yeah.
What does leadership mean to you? How do you define it? What does great leadership look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say leadership to me is being able to help others get to where they want to get. I mean, to me, it's about empowering, right? I mean, you think about it as a let's say you're an executive at a company, right? You've got stakeholders, investors, and so forth, who you're trying to help them get to where they want to get with the business. And then you've got people who you're leading, right? And so they have aspirations, they have goals. So it's helping them get to where they want to get. So it's, to me, it's in the simplest term of just being able to understand that each of us has a place we're trying to get to, and to help those people who we have a responsibility or role with to get there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Now, in jumping to the book, Eric, can you introduce the book with full title and everything, and how it came to be? What was the process that led up to the book?
Sure. So the book is called FairWays to Leadership. It's the same name as the nonprofit. And that's very intentional. So the book, basically about 80% of the book is the curriculum that we have in the nonprofit. So that curriculum, what we did is students go through a 6-week program. Each week they're getting a golf lesson at the golf course, and they're getting a leadership lesson online. And then at the end of it, we play a little graduation round where we bring in experienced players from the community. And so they get to practice their leadership and networking on the golf course. And as I mentioned, about 90% of our students have never played. So for almost all of them, this is their first time to be in this new world and to navigate it. So it really tests all of, they'll recognize real quick, that you've got to adapt with your golf shot, right? They don't go right where you want them to go. You have to adapt. And they recognize integrity of, there are certain rules and etiquette that we follow in this game. And so there's this sort of integrity role. So all of the traits really come out that they've been learning about on the golf course there. So the book, is the 80% of it's that. What we did is we took the golf experience and broke it into 6 leadership moments. These are 6 chapters in the book. They talk about leadership at the clubhouse, the practice tee, the tee box, the fairway, the green, and the 19th hole. And so in each one of those, you'll learn about not only what's going on from a golf perspective, like at the clubhouse, you'll learn about how do you set a tee time, what are the different types of courses, what are green fees, how do green fees change over the course of the day. So you're learning the golf part, but you're also learning how can you use this game to get yourself to spend time with leaders and have access to leadership opportunities. So we talk about things like, how do you find out if somebody plays golf? How do you sort of set your office up so that other people know you play golf, like putting a little putter in the corner or a picture on the wall, right? Because I mentioned the types of students we have. Most people don't think of women as golfers, right? So to have, if you're a woman in the workplace and you do play golf, let people know, right? And that will get you, invitations to outings and having conversations that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise. So all the chapters are sort of like that. They're mixing together both the golf aspect as well as sort of the leadership and networking aspect. And then the other 20%, real quick, just sort of, talk about how do you maximize your return on investment, right? How do you sort of make sure that, you're doing things like connecting after the round is over on LinkedIn. You're following up with meetings. You're sort of making sure that it's not just a golf outing, but this is something that's helping you professionally.
Eric, what have you heard from alumni from your program, from the nonprofit, people that come back after they're a couple years out of it? What have you heard from them in terms of what this has done for them?
So we do an exit survey with our students every semester, and what we say, I would say, some of the top things that we hear for them individually, and then I'll talk a little bit about professionally. Individually, they talk about, as I mentioned earlier, greater confidence to try new things, sort of an enhanced sense of what leadership is and how they can practice it. They also recognize that that they like golf. That's just when they go, oh, I didn't think I'd really like golf, but hey, I do, right? So those are that. I think they see themselves growing as leaders. They see themselves getting an interest that they can follow for the rest of their lives, because golf is one of those games, fortunately, that you can play for your life. And then on the professional side, about 80% of our students say that their professional network has grown as a result of being in the program. About 60% of the students say that they are doing better in interviews as a result. And when we follow up to ask them, how's that happening? They say, well, first of all, I just walk in with more confidence, because it's like going to the golf course, right? I don't know what's going to happen there. But I was able to develop confidence through the program. And so that transfers over to going into someone's office for an interview. And they also say that, they're actually being able to have conversations that are on a more personal and social level because of the game. So for our students, when they complete the program, they get a certificate that goes on their LinkedIn profile saying they completed this leadership development program. And so they say a lot of employers, they go out to our LinkedIn profile, they see this and they ask me about it. And then when I tell them, they go, "Oh, I play golf. I didn't know you played golf." And they get in these whole conversations, right? That just make it a much richer experience and allow them to stand out in someone's mind when they're going through the interview. And then we hear, that they're being, they're getting opportunities at work that they wouldn't have gotten. They're getting, having opportunities to create relationships with their managers and executives who they wouldn't have gotten. So it just really spills over into a lot of things on the professional side.
So Eric, obviously the book followed the program, but does the curriculum do the classes follow? Is it one for one where one class or one session matches up to a chapter in the book? What does the actual program itself look like? I think you gave a general overview of it, but if somebody came into the program, what could they expect in terms of timeline, how many hours a week, what that looks like from one session to the next? What does that program look like? Meaning, how is it you infuse the lessons with the playing time?
Yeah. So, it's a great question. So basically and I should step back and say, all of the students that have gone through the program, all 700 plus, none of them have gotten academic credit for it. They do this out of their own interest in developing themselves as leaders. So we get the hand raisers, right? We get the really, really good students who want to get ahead and just see this as another tool in their toolkit. So what we ask of them is, we say it's about a 2-hour commitment each week for those 6 weeks. 1 hour will be on the golf course, so you'll get a lesson from a PGA professional or an LPGA professional. And then during the week, you have 2 choices on the leadership side. So what we did is we created a podcast series that students can listen to. Each podcast is based around the leadership moments, which are basically the chapters in the book. And each one takes about 45, 50 minutes to listen to. And so they go through each week and a new podcast leadership moment drops for them. They listen to it and they can do it that way. That's for the students whose schedules are pretty tight, and it gives them the flexibility to go through the program. The other thing we have is what we have is an executive forum speaker series. So each week we bring in a leader from industry. It could be in sports, it could be in any industry really. And they talk about their leadership journey. They talk about the role of golf in that journey. And we try to stay away though from what we don't want to have is somebody just come in and say, okay, I did this, then I did this, then I did that, right? I mean, you can look at LinkedIn and see that.
See, that's the same kind of thing I try to avoid with this is like diving into the story, diving into the lesson instead of just the LinkedIn is amazing. Yours is amazing, right? Other people's is amazing, but what is behind that? What's the thinking? Where's the heart kind of thing?
Yeah. And so what we try to do is, we try to put leaders in front of our students who look like them so that the students can know this is the type of journey I'm going to travel, right? So that might, that could be leaders who are first generation college students. It could be leaders who are women. It could be leaders who are leaders of color, right? But we want our students to see role models, leadership role models. And then those people talk about things like, okay, when was the first, or what did you do, was the first thing you did that made you start to think of yourself as a leader? Because we want, that being a leader starts with seeing yourself as a potential leader, right? And then we say, okay, well, what did you do that got other people to start seeing you as a leader? Because the next stage of becoming a leader is having other people validate that. And so they share those experiences. And then we talk about leadership style. And then we talk about, the role of mentors and other people in helping you develop as leaders. So it's, to your point, it's much more about their leadership story than necessarily their leadership career that we're trying to get to.
Yeah, I love that. I love that only because I think, and hey, listen, at a certain point, I think it should be part of the curriculum of universities, just because it teaches relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So you can leave college and you can take all these credits, all these classes, graduate with whatever GPA that you've completed all these classes, but that doesn't do anything for you in the real world. You need this relationship side. I just pictured, I'm not a golfer, But I just picture, like, out of all the sports that immediately come to mind, like in golf, I mean, whether you've got the golf cart or you're walking the fairway, I mean, you're spending hours with whoever you're with.
Mm-hmm.
You're commenting on each other's putts, each other's shots. You're obviously talking about your work. I mean, that to me is like the most, it's competitive. I have a high level of respect for golf, but it's one of those where it is very laid back in terms of, like, you have time. If you're playing soccer, you don't have time in between getting the ball, talking to somebody, or basketball, or anything like that, or cycling. But with golf, you do have that time between the holes to really talk to somebody, to get to know them. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like those are, to me, that's the best skill that a student can have. Is, again, you can have the check boxes of your curriculum, your marketing, your business classes, whatever it may be, but that is what sets people apart, is how they communicate with someone else, how they demonstrate who they are, how they ask about the other person. You don't get that. I went to school, undergrad, 2 master's degrees, but for me, something like that is more valuable, because it is that, how do we communicate with each other? How do we get to know each other? How do we support each other? So I love that. I think hopefully universities get to the point where something like that is part of the curriculum, because I think that's what sets people apart the most.
Yeah, I would say, to your point, what you major in, where you go to school, all those things brand you, right? They're part of your individual personal brand. The networking is about who do you bring that brand to, right? Who do
Mm.
you connect that brand with? And so that's, that piece that you talk about is so important, is, how do you bring your brand to life for other people?
Absolutely. Eric, I'm curious, in writing it, what kind of lessons did you take away? What kind of realizations did you make, or how did your thinking about the topic evolve? What changed the most in you from this book being put out and published?
I think the first thing was just the realization that, hey, I can write a book, right? It's like it always seems like this real daunting task, and then you go do it and you go, okay, that I was able to get through it, and so I think that was the first thing. Going back to what I work with my clients about, or with the students in the nonprofit, just the confidence to sort of be to step into something. And so now I'm thinking about what books might be down the road. The other
Mm,
thing that I really recognize the value of self-discipline. So when I was writing the book, I set a goal for myself, is that each day I had to write 1,000 words, right? And I didn't edit them. I just said I got to get 1,000 words on the page, and then I'll go back and I'll edit it. And that made it a much more manageable task for me than to sit down
yeah.
and think, okay, it's got to be this, it's got to be perfect today. I was like, no, it doesn't have to be perfect today. I just need to keep putting words out there, and they will evolve over time when you go back and you edit it. And so um, that was something I learned, is just sort of the process and the importance of self-discipline. And now that that spills over into my approach to marketing my coaching business and the like. Right, each day I do a little bit that's development, and each day a little bit that's of client work. And so it's just that those little pieces every day add up.
How did it work out with you writing the book with your wife? Did you guys split who had which pieces, which chapter? How did you guys, what was the process for that?
Um, so I sort of bring in a lot of the golf, because I play golf more, and she brings in a lot of the leadership. And so between
Okay.
the two of us, we were able to sort of combine. And then once it was together, we worked together to there's some pull out personal stories in the book. So we each sort of shared some of those that sort of highlights on a more personal level some of the things that we're talking about. So it was sort of, a divide and conquer a little bit, I would say.
Any areas where you guys disagreed on what was included? I mean, I have to ask that. It can't
Yeah,
be all
yeah.
smooth all the time.
I don't know that it was as much about what was included. Maybe it was more about how it was said or presented, right?
Okay.
Um, I, I was like, maybe one example would be, I mean, she came up with the brilliant idea of these little pull-out personal stories. I hadn't seen that at all, right? I was like, okay, I'm just going to get this, get it out there. Being an academic, used to writing these maybe more academic papers, it's more about the text and that type of
Hmm.
thing. And she really helped to sort of, say, no, there's there's a personal side here, right? And she was the one who really pushed me to say, you got some personal stories here, like, the one that I mentioned you of, this was a safe place for you, and that's what you're trying to create with the nonprofit here, a safe place for these students who haven't had an opportunity to be exposed to the game.
And then there was one more other question that I had. I'm sure it'll come to me. So, Eric, you had just mentioned a few minutes ago. What do you think your next writing? What do you think the focus of that writing? Even a general idea. Where would you want to go next?
I'm really interested in the AI area and seeing how AI can assist with coaching, especially this notion of leaders as coaches, and working to come up with ways in which existing leaders can use AI to help them in coaching their staff.
You've spoken about the lessons that you want the book to share with the audience, and how you want it to inspire them, their work, wherever they can take the lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I have you on here today for your book. If I invited you back to talk about a book that's impacted you, what book would that be?
Ooh, good question. I guess it's a recent book, right?
Not necessarily. Whatever comes to mind first, even if it's a few. I'll give you a few.
All right. So the first thing that came to mind was I was a huge fan of Edgar Burroughs' Tarzan series. And I think what they did for me is, growing up in a small town, they helped expose me that there was another world out there, right? And they also gave me this role model of somebody being in a new world and a new environment and being able to succeed in it. So, which, as I think about it out loud now, is sort of what we're doing with FairWays of Leadership, right? We're taking these students, we're putting them into this new world, and they're helping them to succeed. I never thought of it as a Tarzan thing, but maybe it is.
Yeah, people make some weird discoveries on this series. I love watching it play out in real time.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess the one that I'm still working through is a book called Ask by Ryan Levesque. I don't know if you know the book.
I've heard of it. I haven't gotten to it yet.
That's one that I'm always looking for new ways to think about marketing and sales, and I like the simplicity of that one. And it also rings true with what I know to be true from my academic research. So that's one that stands out a lot. But I mean, I have to think about some others. I wasn't prepared for that question, so
No worries, no worries. I like throwing that one out on people. And I remember the question that I was going to ask before about the book in writing it. How long did the book take from when you really started in earnest writing it to when?
I took about, I'm going to say, 8 to 9 months.
Okay.
To write it. Now, I'm working full time and everything at the same time. I finished it, I believe, in like July, and I'd gotten to the point where I was like, okay, I just need to just take this thing over the finish line. And so for me, a real inspirational place is the beach. So I took a weekend. I rented an Airbnb at the beach and just said, okay, I'm finishing the book. And so that was sort of I remember crossing that finish line when because on the TV I had the British Open, or the Open as they call it now. So
of course,
I remember it was right that time of year. So but I would say 8 to 9 months is about how long it took.
Perfect. I'm always just curious of everybody's writing process, the time they put in, what went into it, for my own learning knowledge, working knowledge. Eric, so just in wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything that you want to share? Obviously, you've shared a lot about the nonprofit, your work and such, but is there anything else that you want to mention that I might not have asked about? Anything you want to share with this audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the idea that what I think sort of is part of my own journey and the journey that I try to help my clients with in coaching, and what we try to help the students with the nonprofit, is just a greater sense of self-awareness, right? and that means recognizing what you do bring to the table, and then that also recognizing where your blind spots might be too, right? So I think that's what I'm really focused on now is really helping to empower people to be more self-aware and use that self-awareness to be more successful in getting to their North Star, whether that be in the classroom as an academic, whether it be through the research and books that I've published, whether it be through the nonprofit and the students who go through the program, or through my client work as a coach. It's just about recognizing the strengths and the superpowers that we walk around with, but
Yeah.
so often we just we overlook, and so that's the thing is. And I would say to your audience, take a moment, think about what is your superpower, right? I mean, we all have at least one or two. Look back over your career, look back over your successes, and also look back over where you had to zig. I mean, I think back to I mentioned earlier, I started at Tulane, figured out that wasn't going to work, and rather than just stay with it and make it work and just hope for the best, I said, no, I think there's another place I need to be in order to get to where I want to get. And so I was able to sort of adapt that way. So that would be what I'd say, that self-awareness and that trust in yourself.
Eric, how much I don't think I've asked this question before, but how much have your kids picked up on those lessons of golf and leadership? Have they listened in? Have they done the program? Are they not about it? Like, where do they play into that? I'm curious.
Well, my kids are both my daughters are in their late 20s, so they were out of the house when the program started. But I did teach both of them how to play golf. So I knew at that time that it was an important skill for them to have, especially as women going into the workforce. It differentiates them, right? And it's going to get them into situations. And it also reflected something that I haven't mentioned, that we hear from our students that we didn't anticipate in the nonprofit. And that is, many of our young women say, you know what this has really helped me do is have a better relationship with my father. Because now I've got something in common that we can spend time doing. And I know from my own personal level, I mean, my greatest joy comes from being out on the golf course with my wife and daughters, right? Because you think about it, you've got this uninterrupted time, you're outside, the technology gets put away, and you're just, to your point earlier, you're having these little small conversations. And and so you're networking within the family. And it just
I like that. Yeah, I like that, networking within the family.
Yeah, because so often we all get pulled in our different directions, and so this is a chance for us to come together for 4 hours, which is the typical time it takes to do a round. You ask anybody, you want to do 4 hours, most people go, oh my God, what could I do for 4 hours? But you say, hey, you want to go play golf? And, oh yeah, sure, why not? It'll be fun.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not a golfer. I've been on the golf course once during a charity thing, but my in-laws retired to Florida. They play all the time. One of my clients plays all the time. My wife's cousins play all the time.
Tom, we got to
Maybe
get out on the golf course.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm thinking. Only because with the growing proliferation of technology, I try to look for ways. My kids are young, 8-year-old boy, 5-year-old boy, 2-year-old girl. I'm thinking of ways that I want to keep that cohesion in the family, that networking, as you will, right? As you said, it's like holding a captive audience. Everybody wants to be out there, but holding a captive audience where it's like, okay, we're out in the middle of essentially a field of we're gonna talk, let's talk, what's going on. And you can't really do that with, like I said, other sports. You can do it with other endeavors, but I like the just the camaraderie, the competitiveness, but also, again, that networking within the family. So I think that's a great idea. I love the way you put that.
And the beautiful thing is, you're not playing against each other, right? You're all playing against this common foe, which is the course. So it just lends itself to appreciating when somebody does something well, and understanding when they do something that's not so well. And so it really it will open, and it's something that you would be able to play with your kids when they're in their 50s and you're in your 80s, right? I mean, you can still go out. I mean, you can't do that with a lot of sports. So it just really lends itself to that lifelong networking within the family that you like.
No, I like that. And the way that you've put it, the way I'm sold on golf. I've been sold on golf in this hour that we've had together. It really has opened up a different side of it, of my understanding of the sport itself. And again, Eric's book is Fairways to Leadership, Building Your Business Network, One Round of Golf at a Time. Eric, thank you so much for your time and sitting down with me.
Oh, thank you so much, John, for having me. It was a joy.
Oh, it was awesome. If there's anything that I might have missed, anything I should have asked, we're limited on time. I like to go down rabbit holes, but if there's anything that I might have missed that you think I should have asked Eric, please let me know. Reach out to him. Reach out to me. I'll reach out to him, see what kind of additional insights, knowledge, tips, guidance I can get from him. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right,
Take
thank
care.
you, John.
Bye.